Shall we start?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So today what I'm going to be talking about for the next few lectures, today and a few more lectures, is about orthogonal polynomials. So orthogonal polynomials, these are related to vectors in a way. That is, functions of x are related to vectors. I will try to show you how it is possible to relate them. Okay. So it's very simple. Consider three-dimensional. What happens in three-dimensional space is you have the vectors I1, I2, I3, and any vector is written as x is equal to x1 I1 plus x2 I2 plus x3 I3. So this is something that we have done all along. Okay. So now what I can do is I can actually represent it graphically. So what I can do is I can say value of the component I value of component I versus I by n. N is the dimensionality of the space. So if it's a three-dimensional space, what you have is you have 1/3, 2/3, and 1. Okay, so in this region, yeah, third, yeah. So in this region, I can actually put the components. So for example, I can put this one is x1 and say somewhere here, this value is x2 and somewhere here is x3. Right, I can just plot, x1, x2, x3 as a function of
Sir,
1 by n.
sir, how did you get 1/3, 2/3, and 1?
How many components I have?
3 components. X1, X2, X3.
So yeah, so I made my mistake. So let me put it as 1. So it's in three-dimensional space. Okay. So when I'm looking at the three-dimensional space, n is equal to 3. So I can take values 1/3, 2/3, and 1. Okay. So I'm sorry, I did not present it properly. Okay. So now you see that you can say you can draw these bars. Okay, and that will give you the vector. Now, suppose n is something like 100. Okay, then what happens is that I have a component here, index component of I divided by n, which is 1. So starts with 1 by 100 or 2 by 100, etc., etc., 99 by 100, and so forth. Okay, so now you see that the density of this point, it may be somewhere here, and somewhere here. So like that, it can keep going, and then probably at this point it may be positive or negative, it doesn't matter. Okay, so it may be somewhere here. Okay, so supposing I make n tend to infinity, let n tend to, then what happens is that you will see that component versus I is equal to I by component x equal to I by n, let me call it. X equal to I by n So this will now have very, very close points, right? Okay, so this very much looks like a this thing function. Okay, I can actually write this as a function. It goes like this. Okay, so vectors in infinite dimensional space can actually be represented as function, right? Any question?
Sir, I'm sorry, I'm not able to get what is I equals 1/3, 2/3, and 1. I is a unit vector.
No, I is the x-axis.
Okay, so it is some variable. Okay.
Is some variable, which is the component 1 is at 1/3 value, and component 2 is at 2/3 value, and component 3 is at 1. Okay, n is equal to 3. So the discrete values that I can, this thing, one can take along the x-axis is, let me call this as x1 equal to 1/3, x2 is equal to x2 is equal to 2/3, x3 is equal to 1, right? So this is x1, so this is f of x1, f of x2, f of x3. Okay, so what I'm plotting is basically the value of the component versus the component index. It's just a
Yes.
xy plot.
Okay.
Do you follow it now?
Yes, got it, sir.
Okay, so it's very, very simple. So basically what I have done here is that, the value of the component, first component is somewhere here, value of the second component corresponds to this, third component corresponds to this, fourth corresponds to this, fifth corresponds to this, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 1. So this is a function that is defined between 0 and 1. Okay, so I can actually write it as f of x at x equal to I by n gives the value of the component I. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, so now what I can do is, if as f of x okay, so you see that functions actually represent in some sense an infinite dimensional vector space. Okay, and then what we have is the following, that is, we can define the product as involving functions. Okay, so supposing I give you two functions, fx and gx. Okay, what's it? So then the inner product f comma g can be sigma over I, then fxi gx. Okay, right? Or as I is equal to 1 to n, as n tends to infinity, this can actually be written as integral fx dx dx. Okay, fx are real functions. So I'm not getting any of the function, real functions. Okay, so in general, given a main function, this is generalizing the concept of inner products, which is based on something that I did not discuss before, which is the generalized eigenvalue problem involving Ax equal to lambda times Bx, and B was what is called the metric, or the which is a positive definite metric. Okay, so anybody interested can go and look it up a little more. But in general, given a weight function Wx greater than or equal to 0 over A comma B, and given two functions fx comma gx, we can define the inner product as integral fx gx wx dx integral a to b. So this is equal to comma g. Okay, so the only difference between the expression that I have written here and the expression I'm giving here is the weight function. Generally, in the case of vectors, we took wx to be 1 throughout. Okay, but if you have basis functions which are basis vectors which are non-orthogonal, then wx turns out to be just the overlap matrix, or what you can call the Grams matrix. Okay, that's how we can actually define the. So, for example, if I give you two vectors equal to power I fi ei and g is equal to sigma over I gi ei, and if I say that ei comma ej is not delta ij, but it is some sij, which is an overlap of the two vectors, then you will see that f comma g you get f comma g is equal to sigma over I, sigma over j. So both of them going from 1 to n, 1 to n. Okay. Fi gj ei comma ej, or I can call ei comma ej as the overlap matrix, and I'll get sigma over I is equal to 1 to n, sigma over j is equal to 1 to n, gj sij, sij is equal to ei comma ej. Okay, so if ei comma ej is delta ij, then I get back the usual definition of the inner product, where it is just this thing, product of the components along this orthogonal direction. But if the directions are not orthogonal, then this is a general inner product definition. Okay, so you see that Sij is a Gramian, or it's actually a Grams matrix. And for this thing, linearly independent vectors, Sij is positive definite. This is something that I taught before, and if you have not read it, it is your problem, not mine. I'm not going to repeat it. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that now look at the analogy between this definition of inner product that I have given you here for functions versus the definition of inner product where the vectors are expressed in terms of non-orthogonal but linearly independent basis vectors. You see that Wx basically is playing the role of Sij. Okay, so that's where the weight function comes into picture. Okay, now given this, mainly wx dx and wx greater than or equal to 0 over 1 a comma p. What it means is the following. That is, it's f comma g satisfies distributive property. That is, f comma g plus h is equal to f comma g plus f comma h, and it also satisfies like f comma f, which we call norm f squared, is greater than 0 for f of x not identically equal to 0. Okay, and various properties are we also have the other take a constant alpha and type g, then I get alpha plus alpha g. So this is satisfied, and then if I take alpha plus beta and multiply this into this function f of x, so then this is equal to alpha f of x plus beta f of x. Other kinds of properties like, alpha beta x f of x is equal to alpha beta f of x, because these are all functions. Okay, and 1 into f of x is equal to f of x. So 1 is has the role of unity. Okay. And then f of x plus 0 is equal to 0 plus f of x. So this was the 0 is a null function. Okay. But then I have f of x comma g of x is equal to alpha times f of x comma g of x, because you see these are all the properties. And I also showed you how this in norm f squared is not greater than 0 only for fx not equal to 0. So that way, these functions, the functions defined over the interval a comma b satisfies all the properties of a and it's called a function space because you are now dealing with function. It is called a function space. Any questions so far? Because these were all things that I covered quite some time back. You remember?
Yes, sir.
Most of these covered before. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I will talk about orthogonal polynomials. Okay. So you look at one x squared, etc. are all linearly independent. Okay, so this, of course, you know from experience. You must have actually looked at like f of x identically equal to g of x. Then f of x is equal to f1 plus f2x plus fx squared, etc., etc. And g of x is equal to g1 plus g2x plus g3x squared plus etc. etc. And remember, I'm saying identical equal to, that is, it's true for every value of x. Then we have used this property, right? F1 equal to G1, F2 equal to G2, etc. etc. Okay. You must have done that when you were trying to get the coefficients of, the left hand and the right hand sides being identical. You want to get the coefficients of various powers of the variable. Okay. So this actually means the following, okay, because know that F1 minus P1 plus F2 minus X plus F3 minus G squared plus etc. equal to 0. So this implies F1 equal to G1, F2 equal to G2, and so forth. So X1, X squared, X cubed, these are all linearly independent functions. Okay. So this implies 1 X squared, X cubed are all linear. You remember this? Have you ever used? I don't recall now having used it, but where I have used it, but I'm definitely used this particular thing of equating coefficients of equal powers of x on the left and right hand side. And that property may use, it just shows that powers of x are linearly independent. Okay, any question? No?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, let me define degree of exact degree as p and x is equal to sigma nu is equal to 0 to n alpha nu x to the power nu. Just 1 second, there was a phone call. Okay, nothing important. Okay, so nu is equal to 0 to n alpha nu x nu is a orthogonal polynomial of degree n, and what is the to all numbers of degree less than n. Okay, so for example, take p3 comma 1, which is integral a to b wx p3x dx. This is equal to 0. Once again. Similarly, I have p3 comma 2 integral a to b p3x. Okay, some polynomial of degree 2 or degree 1, because degree 0 is what I've called polynomial 1. Okay, so any polynomial f of 2, f of degree 2, I call it f. So let me use a calculation. F2 of x, F1 of x, okay, and so on and so forth. So F3 is orthogonal to F1 and F2, and let me call this F0. because it's a polynomial of 0 degree. This one is f1 first degree, and p3 comma f2 of any odd degree, something that any specific polynomial, p3 of x, f2 of x, wx is equal to. But remember, p3 is not orthogonal to other polynomials, but p3 equal to integral a to b p3x f4x wx dx is not equal to 0. Means p3 is only orthogonal to functions which are polynomials of degree less than 3. Okay, is not even orthogonal to polynomials of degree equal to 3. Any questions? So how does one construct phi and x? Okay, there are very many different ways. You see, we can use normalization procedure. Construct the orthonormal function. We use another technique which is called the Moments method, which is actually useful. So what I'll say that p and x is equal to sigma over u x to the power u. Okay, so when I say integral wx x to the power I is equal to 0 for I less than n, okay, and integer, it means that p and x p and x x to the power I wx sigma nu equal to 0 to n alpha nu integral a to b x to the nu x to x. So what does it mean? All right, sigma over. Let me expand the sigma over. So what it means is alpha naught okay, x to the power I wx dx plus alpha 1 integral a to b x wx dx x to the power I plus 1, sorry, okay, plus etc. plus alpha n integral a to b x to the power n plus I wx dx equal to 0, and this is true for all equal to 0, 1, 2, etc. minus 1. So which means I'll get n equations. Okay, so let us call integral a to b x to the power I wx mu I, which is higher moment of wx. Okay, so nothing but you know, you remember when you are taking averages, I is equal to 1 used to be the average. Okay, so sum over I xi, sum over I x sub I divided by n was the average, and similarly you had the variances and higher moments. So basically this is the moment mu I. So the ith equation, what will be the ith equation? Sigma over j mu I plus j, j is equal to 0 to n minus 1, okay, times alpha j. Just a second, let me see whether it is j is equal to n. Alpha j is equal to 0. This is the ith equation, which forces orthogonality for I n of x. Alpha naught. So I plus j, right? So alpha naught I is equal to 0 is the first equation. Alpha naught mu naught plus alpha 1 mu 1 plus etc. plus alpha n mu n equal to 0. This is the first equation. The second equation will be alpha 1 alpha naught mu 1 plus alpha 1 mu 2 plus alpha n mu n plus, so this is an equation, right? I say that it has to be orthogonal to x, and so on and so forth. And my n minus 1th equation or nth equation, alpha naught mu n plus alpha n mu 2n minus 1 equal to 0. This is the nth equation. Okay, so what I was doing was forcing the orthogonality to x to the power n minus 1. This is orthogonality to x to the power n. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions?
Sir.
Okay, so let's the following. That is, if p and x is an orthogonal function of x less than n, then some constant, say k times p and x, is also an orthogonal. Because that is the property of the integral, isn't it? If I multiply any function by a constant, then the integral gets multiplied by the constant. And so if that function was orthogonal to some function, then any constant multiple of that function is also orthogonal to the other function. Okay? Any doubts? So without loss of generality, Set alpha is 1 and transfer the last term in all equations okay, so I will get the following: alpha naught mu naught plus mu 1 plus etc etc plus alpha 1 mu n minus un alpha 1 mu naught plus alpha naught mu 1 plus alpha 1 mu 2 plus alpha n minus 1 mu n is equal to minus mu n plus 1. Alpha naught mu n minus 1 plus alpha 1 mu n plus etc. plus alpha n minus 1 mu 2n minus 1 is equal to what I had and alpha n minus 1. So I have to add n. So this will be minus mu 2n. Is that what I'll get? Okay. So alpha n mu 2n minus 2. Made a mistake. Okay. So what do I have? I can write it down in terms of matrix. I can write it down as mu minus 1 and then mu 1, mu 2, etc. mu n, so on and so forth until mu n minus
Sir, along with mu on the RHS, we also had
times
alpha, na?
alpha naught. No, alpha n I have taken to 1.
Okay. Okay, sir.
So you are not paying attention.
No, sir, your voice is breaking.
I spent 5 then to change your phone. Okay, so I showed you here that if phi nx is an k times phi nx is also an orthogonal polynomial, so alpha n can be taken to be equal to 1. Okay, minus mu n all the way to mu. Okay, so this is an n matrix. This is n unknowns, and this is a vector B of n components. Am I right? So I can call this to be M, the matrix, and this I can call as alpha is equal to B. Okay, so then is M non-singular? Because P is not identical. because components of Wx will not be identically equal to 0. Because you have both the even powers, odd powers, and all that, and Wx is always greater than 0. So even if you have something between minus infinity and infinity, it does not go to 0. Okay? So because the even powers of x will contribute. So now you see that m should be non-singular, otherwise you cannot find a solution for this one. Now, is m non-singular? Okay. So how do you, so for m to be okay. M is positive definite. Is it also a necessary condition? Is it necessary? I just said it is sufficient. Should M be also this thing? Is it necessary and sufficient that M should be positive definite? Is my voice breaking and you don't hear the question?
I don't know, sir. Done.
When is M positive definite? When is a matrix positive definite?
If all the elements are positive.
If all the what? Say it.
All the diagonal elements are positive.
Is it diagonal elements or is it eigen? I can give you a matrix M singular. You know, take the matrix. Diagonal elements are positive.
These are the eigenvalues.
So eigenvalues have to be positive. Okay. Now, should all the eigenvalues should the determinant be positive only if you must have a inverse? Does a matrix have an inverse only when all the eigenvalues are positive, or it can also have an inverse when the eigenvalues are either positive or negative but non-zero?
Yes, it can have.
It can have. For example, you know, you can have this matrix 1, 0, 0. This has an inverse, the same thing. Okay. But the eigenvalues are 1 and minus 1. Okay. Non-zero. Okay. But not all positive. So this also can have an inverse. So now, so positive definiteness is actually a much stronger criterion than for having an inverse. Okay. Let psi be any vector, any n component vector. Let psi be any n component. What we want to show is that psi transpose m psi, which is equal to psi is equal to sigma over I, sigma j, psi I, mij, psi j. Okay. This is equal to sigma over I, sigma over L, psi mu mu I plus j, psi j, right? Because mij, what is the matrix elements of mij? I equal to 0 to n minus 1, j is equal to 0 to n minus 1.
Mu I plus.
You can go back and look at the matrix. Okay, and so this is equal to Sorry. Let me- Sorry. This is equal to sigma over I. Then I have, let me not put sigma over I there. But this is equal to sigma over I x to the power I is equal to minus 1. Sigma over j is equal to minus 1 x to the power j. This is psi I psi j. Okay. Sigma over j 0 to n minus 1 in psi I psi j x to the power a plus j wx dx. That is the definition of the moment. Okay. So now, what is this equal to? This is equal to 1 psi square, where psi is equal to psi not x psi not sorry. Psi dot plus psi 1x plus psi 2x squared plus etc. plus psi n minus 1 x to the power n. Okay, so I have made a mistake in saying what the psi is before. Oh. Yeah, that's okay. Psi is an n component vector given by sigma over I equal to 0 to n minus 1 psi I x to the power I. If it allows me. Okay, so what can you say about norm psi squared? What is the condition? What is the property of the norm? Norm of a function, the way it has been defined. What is the property?
Greater or equal to 0.
It is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, therefore, okay, therefore M is positive definite and we'll have an inverse. Uh, okay, consider the interval a comma b and wx is equal to 1. Okay, which is greater than or equal to 0 over the entire interval. Okay, now what you have is the moment mu k is equal to integral -1 to 1 x to the k dx. What is the value of this? What is the value of this integral? -1 to 1 x to the power k dx. We have done integration.
Sir, what?
If you can't answer, what is the value of the integral -1 to 1 x to the power k dx? If you don't know that, there is no point doing this class.
So 1 by k plus 1 minus -1 to the power k plus 1 by k plus 1.
What is the value? Give me the value. Don't give me a formula. What is the integral of x to the k dx?
X to the power k plus 1 by k plus 1.
So you put between -1 and 1. So what you will get is the following. It is 2 divided by k plus 1. If k is equal to 0, right? Because an odd function between a symmetric interval around 0, its integral is always 0. Right? So now let me write down the moments matrix for this one. The moment matrix. The first one, 0, 2/3, 0, 2, etc. The symmetric matrix. This is yeah. So and then uh, 2/3, so, etc. etc. 2 by 5, so, and then I this, so, okay, you just have to write down that mu I is equal to 2 upon a plus j plus 1 j equal to 0 for I plus j odd. Okay, so 1 1 is even, so you have 2. 1 2 is odd, the sum of I plus j, so that is 0, and 1 3 is 4, so that will be I plus 2 by I plus j, not 2 by I plus j, not 2 by I plus j. Okay, 2 by 3 and so forth. So now let me just consider the following. So if we have a if we have a matrix which is 3 by 3, and we construct then what we have is the following: 2 0 2 by 3 0 2 by 3 0 2 by 5, 0, sorry, 2 by 3, 0, 2 by. Also 2 is equal to what I will have is 0 minus 2 by 5, 0. Okay, so if I were to just okay, so if I were to put m alpha equal to b, this is what I would get, and I have worked out the inverse function following. So this is m alpha is equal to b. M inverse is 9 by 8, 0 minus 16 by 8, then I have 0, 60 by 45, 0, and then I have minus 4 by 9, 0, 4 by 3 times 0 minus 2 by 5, 0. So what I'll get is M inverse. So for alpha, I'll get the following. So alpha 1 is 0. Okay. So alpha, let me. Alpha 0 is 0. Alpha 1 is equal to minus 3 by 5. And alpha. Oh. So when I just multiply it, M inverse B is equal to minus 0 times. Once again, let me just multiply it out. Probably not noted it down. So this is minus by 5. Oh, okay. So this is going to give me 0, 0, minus 3 by 5, 0. Okay. And I know that this is alpha 0, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 is 1. So I get p2 1 x x cube minus 3 by 5x. Because alpha 1 has a coefficient minus 3 by 5, alpha 3 is set to 1. So I have x cube minus 3 by 5 times x. Have you people heard of Legendre polynomials?
No, sir.
So nobody has heard of Legendre polynomials?
Sir, if hydrogen atom is solid.
They are associated Legendre polynomials. Associated Legendre polynomials. You have to start from Legendre polynomials. So they are the theta functions of theta. Okay. Okay. What I'm going to do next? Let me see what it is. Okay, so I want to talk about the convention that I use for defining a polynomial. To define a normalized polynomial. Pn, okay, that is Pn, the coefficient of x to the power n is Kn. Okay, so basically what I mean to say is that n plus etc. etc. Okay. Similarly, Pn minus 1 x will be k n minus 1 x to the power n minus 1 plus. Okay. So this is a convention that I'm going to be using. Now, before I use these conventions anywhere, but this is what I wanted to set out right in the beginning because I'm going to be using it. But the next one that I'm going to tell you is something different. That is, I'll talk about zeros of orthogonal polynomials. So suppose you give me an x, a zero of phi n x is phi x mu is a zero of is equal to 0. Okay. So what you have is the following equation, right? So put phi n x equal to 0. Solutions of this polynomial equation are zeros of n. Okay, so for example, if I give you a second degree polynomial, like if I say alpha x squared plus beta x plus gamma equal to 0, then the 0 x 1 comma 2 equal to square beta squared sorry is equal to minus beta times of beta squared plus 4. Okay, that is the solutions of this quadratic equation will be the zeros of this polynomial. So in general, for any polynomial, you can get the zeros. So which means that this you can write as x minus x1 times x3. So zeros of a polynomial ones that okay. So it's very ruins my concept. So if I equal to x minus x1 x minus 2 alpha 1 alpha 2 then x1 x2 xr are zeros of, let me not call it phi and x, let me call it n of are zeros of fn of x with multiplicities alpha 1 alpha 2 it's alpha. Okay, zeros of a function. Zeros of a function of a variable x are the values of x for which the function goes to 0. Any questions? And we have alpha 1 plus alpha 2 plus alpha r. You have only zeros. Okay. So the zeros of an orthogonal polynomial one real, two distinct, and 3 lie in the interval A to B. Okay, so this is the theorem, because when I give you an ordinary polynomial equation, okay, it is not necessary that all the zeros of the polynomial equations must be within a given interval. It is also not necessary that they must all be real. They may also have multiple roots, right?
Yes, sir.
Am I right? Because so this is an extremely restrictive theorem, so which is satisfied by orthogonal polynomial. That means, first of all the zeros are real. Okay, and no zero repeats. This is extremely important. No zero repeats. And the third one is that the zero lies within the interval a comma b. Okay, so if I give you a polynomial phi n x of degree 1000, okay, so it'll have 1000 roots or 1000 zeros. The important thing is all these 1000 zeros will lie between interval a comma b. So if I were to take my uh, interval to be -1 to 1 and the weight function to be 1, then that phi 1000 of x will have all its zeros lying between -1 and 1. Okay, and they will all be distinct. Okay, and this is true whether you are dealing with phi 1000x or phi 1,000,000x. It does not matter. Okay, you will always have this particular problem of this particular property of the zeros being distinct, real, and lying in the interval a comma b. So you have to appreciate it because it is such a unique thing. Because if I give you an arbitrary polynomial, the zeros can be anywhere on the imaginary plane. Okay, so if I have the number plane, real axis, real numbers along x-axis, imaginary number along y-axis, the zeros will lie anywhere on that plane. Okay, so that's what happens when I give you any arbitrary function. But when I give you an orthogonal polynomial, all these zeros will lie on the real line. And they will always be within the interval of the orthogonal polynomial. And they will all be distinct as well. Okay, this property is used extensively. So now I have to prove this. So to prove that, first of all, the polynomial okay, then quantity greater than 1. What can you say about this? Actually Pm, so n greater than or equal to. What can you say about this this integral? It will be
0.
because integral Pm P naught x is some constant C. Right? Because the 0 degree polynomial, see phi nx has to be orthogonal to the 0 degree polynomial. And 0 degree polynomial is just a constant which you can take as 1. So phi nx wx dx is equal to 0. So which actually means that phi nx WA is greater than 0. Phi nx must change sign a. Otherwise integral can be 0. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
integral to vanish. Must change sign at least once. Okay. Now let me assume the following. Assume there are zeros of odd. That is Pn of x. I can write it as x minus x1 over alpha 1, x minus x2 over alpha 2. Not the same as the, I'm using alpha as the general coefficients or general index. Okay, so don't get confused with what I have done with alpha r times psi alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha r are all odd. So what I'm saying is that because it has to change sign at least once, so let me assume that there are points like x1, x2, xr at which it changes sign. For it to change sign, the multiplicity of the 0, x1, x2, xr must be odd. Okay, so it can be x minus x1 or x minus x1 cube or x minus x1 to the power 5 and so forth. But it has to be odd. It cannot be x1, x minus x1 squared, because if it is x minus x1 squared, then it won't change sign at x1. Okay, is this clear?
Yes.
So what is the degree of the polynomial is psi?
N minus r.
I put it alpha for all or 1. N minus of alpha 1 minus alpha 2 minus alpha. Okay. So x2, x2, x minus x3 is the power 5, etc. So each one gives you polynomials of degree alpha 1, alpha 2, and alpha r. So psi x, p and x is a polynomial of degree n. So psi x must be a polynomial of degree less than n, but given by n minus alpha 1 minus alpha 2, n. Now let me consider the following. That is x minus x1. Let me multiply the left hand side to the right hand side. Okay, I'll tell you. So psi of x does not change sign. A comma b. Because it would be changing sign in a comma b, then there would have been one more zero with odd multiplicity, right? Right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
This is not. Okay, so now multiply both sides. Minus x1, x2, minus x1. Okay, so I get p and x, x minus x1, x minus x2, etc., x minus xr. Okay, this is equal to x minus x1 to the power alpha 1 plus 1, x minus x2 to the power alpha 2 plus 1, x minus to the power alpha plus 1, psi of it. Okay, and what I'll do is then multiply both sides by dx integrate from a to b. Let integral a to b and x minus x1, x minus x2, x minus xr, wx dx is equal to integral a to b x minus x power alpha 1 x minus to the power alpha 2 plus 1 x minus r to the power alpha r plus 1 by x dx. Now, what can you say about the integral on the left hand side?
It is 0.
What can you say about the integral? Huh? So this is 0 if r is less than n. Right? Because this is the formula f of r, and that has to be orthogonal. Sorry. So that is a polynomial of degree x of r, x of r, and 0 if r is less than n, because Pn is an orthogonal. Now, what can you say about the right hand side? This I have to multiply by wx. What can you say about the right hand side? Does it is equal to alpha 1 plus 1 change sign in a comma b? Does it change sign in a comma b? X minus x1 to the power alpha 1 plus 1. Alpha 1 is odd.
So it is always positive.
So also all the others, right? So this is completely positive. Always greater than 0. Okay. Wx is greater than 0. Also be greater because here x minus 0 is even power. This is also greater than 0. Okay. So this cannot be 0. Right? So how can you reconcile this? This can be reconciled. R is equal to n, then the left hand side becomes a polynomial degree n. So Pnx is not orthogonal to that, and the right hand side will be non-zero. So we'll perfectly fine. But if r is less than n, it cannot happen, which means that this implies that x minus x1 x minus x1 is a polynomial of degree n and if you had any root which was repeating, then you can again go back and show that there's a contradiction. Okay, all the roots are distinct and lie in a comma b, hence real. Okay. Any questions?
Sir, if r is greater than equal to n,
No, how can r be greater than or equal to n? Because 1 to the alpha 1 x minus x2 to the alpha 2 x minus x r to the power alpha r. Alpha 1, alpha 2 are all odd and positive. Otherwise, they are not zeros. Okay, given that, how can r be greater than n?
Okay, sir.
Okay. So, so r cannot be greater than n. Right? Because you see from here, r cannot be greater than n. R can at most be equal to n, in which case psi of x is a constant. Okay. And if r is equal to n, then each one of these zeros, x1, x2, etc., are having single multiplicity that is non-degenerate, or in other words, they are all distinct. Okay, and they also lie in the interval a to b because they are allowing the function to change sign. Any other questions? Any other? Okay, so this is an extremely important theorem because, and it's one of those, one of the most beautiful theorems because you can imagine, like this theorem is valid where even when n is a billion, and the interval for, say, for example, for something like using Legendre polynomials is -1 to 1. So you have 1 billion zeros in the interval -1 to 1, which are all real and distinct. Okay, nothing, no zero overlaps the other zero. Okay, so this is a really okay. After having done that, let me try to go to what we call occurrence relationship. So I told you earlier that if we are etc. Don't know the other part, but that's what I always call it Kn. Similarly, I told you Pn minus 1 x is equal to Kn minus 1 x to the power n minus 1 plus etc. Okay. Now make the point. Again, if I move the screen. So consider this one. Pnx minus Kn minus Pn. So what are the coefficients? Does xpn minus 1 x does it have a coefficient for the exponent? And multiply p as 1 by x. Do you have a coefficient corresponding to x to the power n? How does xpn minus 1 go? Are you people able to hear me?
Sir, your voice is break.
But I'm asking you, what is the coefficient of x to the power n in x times Pn minus 1? What is the coefficient of x to the power n in this?
Kn.
No, only in this one. We are multiplying this by u. If you multiply this by x, you get Kn minus 1 x to the power n, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you divide it by Kn minus 1, you get x to the power n. you multiply it by kn, you get kn x to the power n. So when you subtract phi n x from phi n x, kn upon kn minus 1 x to the power phi n minus 1. What is the leading power of x that you will have here?
X to the power
What is the degree of this polynomial?
x to the
So
power
it
n
will say
minus 1.
Yeah. If x is not here, because all I did was just, this thing, change the coefficient of x to the power n minus 1 to kn and multiplied it by x and subtracted from phi n x. So that kn x to the n in phi n x cancels the this thing, coefficient of x to the power n in kn upon kn minus 1 x times pn minus 1. Okay. Having said this, so you can pn minus kn in the alpha nu phi nu, right? Because these are orthogonal polynomials. So this is a polynomial of degree n minus 1. So I can expand it in terms of the orthogonal polynomials of degrees 0, 1, 2, etc. up to n minus 1. And the coefficients will be alpha nu phi nu. Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I think in the next class, what I'll do is I'll carry from here and I'll try to get a recurrence relationship between phi n x, x phi n minus 1x, and phi n minus 2x. Okay. So I'll stop here at this point.
Sir,
If
which
you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
book, sir, which book to refer for?
So it's the same book. Will. Have you seen the book?
Yes, sir, I've been reading some topics.
I'm asking you, Prahlad. Have you seen the book?
Yes, sir, I've been reading some topics,
It's available on
but I've got a will, uh, which is for
Yeah.
just a second.
Which is for what?
It is for physical sciences, but you had suggested mathematics for engineers and physicists. So
Oh,
that
physical
one I
sciences.
don't
Okay.
have.
I gave a wrong title. Because he has written only one book.
Okay, sir.
It's a mathematics for the physical sciences. I think that is.
Sir, but it does not have everything that you speak. It does not have everything. For most
Yeah.
of the things, then we have to refer your lectures.
You can refer to the lectures, or also you can refer to basic engineering mathematics. Okay. So WILF is the book I have used only for vectors, vector spaces.
Yes, sir. Even
Okay.
in vector spaces, you did one derivation to express a transformation as n by m matrix. So that derivation also it did not have. And
Yeah, but because he doesn't give it in detail.
yes,
I just explained it to you because if I am just going to tell you what's in the book, then what is my job?
yes, sir.
I have to
And
supplement
even the
it.
definition of inner product space, they have not done it very rigorously.
No, inner product is the same thing. He has done it. I just expanded on what he has said. He's very compact and dense, terse.
Yes.
Okay, so that's all. I just am expanding on it. Nothing new in that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let me stop here and we will see again on Wednesday. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we can